Next lesson then is Fighting Cholera in London, the significance of the work of John Snow and the Broad Street Pump. Despite all the innovations and the breakthroughs of science and rational thinking during the 19th century, when disease came along, it still was near nigh impossible to solve the problem unless individuals would make breakthroughs. Cholera would be beaten by John Snow. It wouldn't be an immediate transformation because, like all discoveries at the time, it would take time for his ideas to be accepted. But with hindsight, we now know that John Snow made a significant breakthrough in understanding how cholera was transmitted. So again, when we look at our course, we're working our way through. We're now down to the final sections here of our booklet on the 19th century, 1700 to 1900. All right, Fighting Cholera in London, 1854, the attempt to prevent its spread and the significance of Snow and the Broad Street Pump. So as per usual, we're going to do unscrambling the key words. I will go through all of them and then you can pause. You need to be able to unscramble each of the key terms. You can pause here. Right, now we'll go through these now. Again, the onus is on you as a learner. If there are terms here that you cannot unscramble or you don't understand why they're significant, you will need to make a note of these and attach these to your booklet. Firstly then, the Public Health Act. Now there are two in the 19th century. One is 1848, the work of the campaigner Edwin Chadwick. It was a major breakthrough because it was the first Public Health Act, but it didn't have that much power. So it was more of a request than an order. The next Public Health Act of 1875 would have more teeth. It would actually be enforced. Two is spontaneous generation. Before germ theory and the work of Pasteur and Robert Koch, the belief that infection came into being spontaneously. Three, miasma theory. The belief that disease was spread through bad air. Four, Florence Nightingale, the reformer of nursing and also the first significant female to appear in our course. A very unconventional character who broke the traditions of what a woman could and should do during the 19th century. And it was during the Crimean War in the 1850s that she, appalled by the state of nursing provision for the British Army, campaigned to raise the status of nurses and improve hospital care. Vaccination, the work of Edward Jenner, and consequently other people like Pasteur and Koch. Scutari was the hospital where Florence Nightingale tested and proved her new nursing standards. Germ theory is the work of Louis Pasteur, and germ theory is there. That's in error. And finally, laissez-faire. Laissez-faire is the belief that a government's role should be minimal, a hands-off government that do the barest minimum in the lives of people. That was an easy position to take in terms of people's health when the government didn't know what to do, but during the 19th century it's become very much clearer that there are things that the government can do and the people expect the government to do that. So for example, the Public Health Acts. The development of vaccinations leads to the governments taking a lead in making sure that children are vaccinated. Now, these next pages aren't printed in your booklet. There are additional things that you may choose to do if you feel the need to. Remember, one of your questions on the medicine paper is a comparison question. So can you complete this table comparing the Middle Ages with the Renaissance? What things stay the same? What things change? If you complete this, please staple it into your booklet. Then repeat again and check your answers with the examples provided below. If there are any here that you didn't initially include, please add them in green pen. And now compare the next two periods, the Renaissance with the 19th century. Same process, examples of continuity, things staying the same, examples of things changing. Write down your ideas, pause here, and then progress. And these are the examples of continuity and change from the period as well. Key individuals. Now, as you've been told repeatedly, the medicine course is rather light on content towards the beginning, but gets considerably heavier in content towards the end. So many of these individuals are from the 19th century, from this third section of your course. So we have Hippocrates and Galen from the ancient world and the medieval world. We have 3 from the Renaissance, but we have 6 from the 19th century. So it's incredibly important. Now, if you remember, the key understanding for each of these is who were they, when were they, what did they discover or contribute, why are they significant, and what are the limiting features or limiting judgments on what they could do. You need to be able to tell me answers to each of those questions for each of these individuals. Who were they, when were they, what did they do, why it was significant, what were the limiting features. If you haven't put together little biographic packs on each of these individuals, now would be the chance to do that and make sure that you have them on flashcards or in note form. So we're going to look now at the work of Snow, investigate his discovery, but firstly, what do we already know about public health? What key term describes how people did not think it was the government's job to address public health issues? That is the term of laissez-faire. The government did not believe it was their responsibility to look after the health of the people. They believed that that was the responsibility of the people. And in all honesty, even if they were interested in people's health, there wasn't a lot they could do until discoveries had been made that would make that possible. The major disease of the 19th century was cholera. The 1848 Public Health Act said that councils could appoint a medical officer and provide clean water and sanitation, but critically, it didn't make that compulsory. As more middle class and working class men gained the vote, they're more likely to vote for a government that will look after their interests. If the new voters didn't have a long life expectancy or access to clean water, they're going to ask the government to provide that. So the more ordinary people that got the vote, the greater demands were made on the government to look after them. The difference between the 1848 and 1875 Public Health Acts is that the 1875 Public Health Act was compulsory. There were orders that councils had to follow. There were punishments if they didn't follow. So, why this change in the role of the government? Well, there was massive change during this period, as it's known as the Industrial Revolution. New cities like Leeds, Liverpool, Manchester, Birmingham and London massively increased their sizes. But because the government didn't take an interest, there was no planning, there was no infrastructure, no clean water or suitable sanitation. People crowded into old or poorly built houses, often built by the men who owned the factories in which they worked. The Industrial Revolution was a period of terrible dirt, pollution and poverty. Here is an example by Dr. J.P. Kay, The Moral and Physical Conditions of the Working Class in Manchester in 1832. The River Irk, black with the refuse of dye works erected on its bank, receives excrement from some sewers in this portion of town. The drainage of the gasworks and the filth of the most harmful character from the boneworks and tanneries, etc. The parish burial grounds occupy one side of the stream, and a series of courtyards with many dwellings of houses of the most unhealthy character on the other. Dr. K there is painting a picture of terrible living conditions. Dr. Robert Baker, A Report to the Leeds Board of Health, 1833. The board will see at once how the disease, cholera, has been rampant in those parts of the town where there is often an entire lack of sewerage, drainage and paving. In one division of the town, occupied entirely by cottage dwellings, including cellar dwellings for 386 people, there are but 2 single privies, toilets. In such streets as these, the board will see the highest rate of cholera attacks. King Cholera, the name given to this famous illustration from the period, showing people living in dirty, squalid conditions, rammed in, and the filth on the streets and the children playing in it. Cholera was one of the most prevalent diseases of the Industrial Revolution. It was known as King Cholera. There was a major outbreak of cholera in 1831 and 1832. In that outbreak, over 21,000 people died in London alone. Another major outbreak in 1849 to 50 killed 50,000 individuals. Cholera killed fewer people over the years than other infectious diseases like tuberculosis, but it frightened people a lot more. There is the picture in greater detail. This is one of the most famous illustrations, I guess, in 19th or 20th century history. Most people who lived in wealthy areas and read newspapers would have no idea of the conditions in the poorer areas because they simply didn't visit them. This illustration brought home the conditions in which the people that worked in their factories were actually living in. And it's one of the reasons why the government felt compelled to start making changes, passing laws. Clearly, looking at that picture, the 1848 Public Health Act didn't make a great deal of impact on their lives. Something more serious and more powerful would have to be brought in. That was the 1875 Public Health Act. So John Snow, the focus of what we're going to look at today. When there was an outbreak of cholera in Broad Street in the Soho area of London, I decided to investigate it. Dr. John Snow then, on the mode and communication of cholera, 1854. That's the title of the book that he wrote. The most terrible outbreak of cholera is probably that which took place in Broad Street, Golden Square, London, and the adjoining streets a few weeks ago. There were upward of 500 fatal attacks in 10 days. There is the reading that I would like you to undertake, some imaginary entries from Dr. John Snow's diary, each of them in turn looking at plausible explanations, that of miasma, the role of God, spontaneous generation, and possibly the fact that cholera might be spread through the water. Read my imaginary diary from the time. What did I think the major suspects for causing cholera were? Then in your booklet, what I would like you to do is work your way through that table. What are the relative strengths of each of these arguments? What are the weaknesses?